Hello and welcome. My name is Jess, and you're listening to Legaltini, a dynamic, hopefully insightful, and somewhat entertaining podcast documenting my experience getting into law school and following my story in the years to come. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm very excited to share what I have to share with you. So grab your Legaltini and let's take a sip. Hello, welcome back to this week's episode of Legaltini. This week I want to talk about planners and how to use them, when to use them, why to use them, why to never try to think that you can do anything without a planner. I think I could sell planners door to door. I love planners. Obviously, if you haven't noticed yet, I'm a bit of a type A personality, but I also think that organization is the very first step to achieving really anything and kind of getting your feet on the right track. So I want to talk about planners, and I want to, if I can, convince you of the one that I use. You may be able to tell that my voice is sounding a little bit more sultry than usual. I've got a bit of a head cold, so bear with me for this episode. So planners, I have used planners since I was probably in high school, maybe even before some version of a planner. I've always loved lists and to-do lists and checking things off. I've done a podcast already about why to-do lists are so exciting for the human brain. So check that one out for a little bit deeper of a dive on to-do lists. I use a planner for daily tasks. I love it for looking ahead, for habit tracking, planning out your week mentally and kind of knowing when your tougher days are going to be and when you have a lighter day and you could add in some things that you've been meaning to get to. I also really like it for looking backward. I've many times looked back at old planners and looked at the lists of things that I was so stressed about during that week. And looking back on it, I can be like, wow, I really got through it and I accomplished so much and I was able to do so much. And look how much I've grown over the years. I mean, I still have all my planners from college, and I sometimes will reminisce and look through them because it's just such a great reminder that we can go through hard things, we can do hard things and come out the other side stronger. So I really love a planner for looking backward and kind of, almost using it as a diary or a journal of what you went through. And I would put things on there like first date with so-and-so or dinner with Sarah, or things that I was excited about and memories, so that I can look back and be like, oh, this is such a fun kind of sequence of my life that I get to see. So that's what I have used it for. Obviously, I've used it for work for years, and it's usually a combination of my digital calendar on my email system and then also a handheld planner, which I have recently moved to a digital planner, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But so yes, I can't speak highly enough about using a planner, especially in law school, in a time when you are every minute really counts and you can't waste time thinking about what should I do next. You have to have every hour accounted for. You can't expect to wing it like you did in undergrad or in high school. Even if you're a really high achieving student, you just can't rely on those tactics anymore. And you have to have a plan and an action plan really for the week of attack of how you're going to manage the many things that need to be done. And also what's important is that you need to plan to rest and have fun and prioritize your time accordingly. Without a plan, I think there's an expression like, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, something like that. I totally buy into that. I think if you don't make a plan, you are not going to accomplish as much as you could if you did have a plan. So that is my, I'll step off my soapbox in a moment, but that is my spiel about why planners are so important. You just have to use something. If you, don't want it to be this frilly, girly thing with things you can color in, fine, get a really simple one. If you want something that gives you a little bit of a artistic release with it, then get one of the ones that has a little coloring page for every month. I mean, do what you need to do, but you cannot get by without a planner, period. Your old system of, random scraps of paper being your to-do list and phone reminders and just counting on a professor to email you to remind you that your assignment is due, that's not going to happen. No one is holding your hand anymore. If you are failing, you're not going to know until the end of the semester when it's too late. And there's too much to be done to hold out until the end to really get things organized. And systematic. So you have to do it, and you have to do it now. If you are already in school and you don't have a planner and you feel like you're drowning, that should be the first thing you do in an emergent way. You really have to do it. So if you are already using a planner and you're kind of interested in maybe making a change or doing something a little bit different, I really recommend a program called Notion. It's a digital, totally customizable workspace. It allows you to create pages and connect them in a way that makes sense to your brain, which I really appreciate, because I feel every time I've bought a planner, I've kind of been like, oh, but I wish that it would then have this page, or I wish that it didn't have this part and I could replace it with this. And I've always felt very, not frustrated, but just a little bit stifled maybe by the planners that I buy. And I've bought really in-depth ones, and then I'm like, but half of this is junk and I don't want it. And so what I really love about Notion is that it's totally your own. You get to build it from the ground up. Whatever makes sense to your brain is exactly how you can create it. So that is incredible to me. My friend Alex told me about it months ago, and she was like, yeah, I'm doing this new thing. It's called Notion. And she kind of showed it to me on her phone, and I was like, oh yeah, that seems cool, and dismissed it. And then a few months after that, I think I heard about it maybe from someone else, and I asked her about it again, and she told me about it again, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have jumped on this when you first told me about it. This is incredible. And when you use it on a desktop, it's a little bit different than using it on your phone, but you have access to it in both places, which is perfect for me when I'm on the go a lot and think of something, randomly when I'm at the grocery store. Oh, I need to remember to do that. I can go into my Notion on my phone right there in the cereal aisle and put it in so that I don't forget it. And then I can let my brain go to rest about that thing. I don't have to stress about remembering to do it when I get home to my planner, to my to-do list, to write it down. It has changed my whole outlook, and I love having the digital element of it. I love having everything connect on here, so you can have certain tables and to-do lists that you can reference in other places, so you can connect it. It's really helpful, and it's shareable. So I also work on projects with other people that I'm helping with their goals or with their projects. I can help them and access the things that they're working on, and we can both edit the table together and show each other, and you can see when someone's working on it. It's very cool. I really have enjoyed it, and I've used a lot of digital planners. I've used Asana, I've used Todoist, Monday. Those are kind of the most notable ones that I've used, and I don't know, there were a lot of limitations I felt like on those, and Notion is this like big wide open world where you can create whatever you want to create. And I don't know, I've really enjoyed it, and I've used a lot of templates, and I've basically used a template, figured out how it works, and then recreated that element of the template that I liked into my own templates and into my own stuff that I use. So the things that I use most in it is obviously like a to-do list and like a generic. I have like yearly planning, and then that breaks down into quarterly planning, and then each quarterly planning breaks down into weekly, and then I have weekly to-do lists, I have a weekly habit tracker, I have kind of priorities for the week, priorities for the month, priorities for the quarter. So it's a great way you can dive down as deep as you want, or you can be as shallow into the planning as you want, and it gives you like a good breakdown of everything. I also have a wish list page where anytime that I'm like, ooh, I'd like to buy a new pair of shoes, or I really need a new pair of jeans, or I'd like some noise canceling headphones for school, or I need to get a book stand, or I'm buying a new laptop. I put it into the wish list. I put in like the price information, the link that I have, any notes I have, and then I kind of just let it sit there. And I can notate on there what stage of buying I'm at, like if I'm still researching, if I'm deciding whether or not. I can also put in one of my properties or my categories that I have for each item is whether it's something I need, something I want, something I really want, and I can categorize it that way so that I can visualize all the things that I'm mulling over. And so it kind of stops me from doing this like constant shopping online thing, because I put it in to my wish list, and then I can kind of like think about it and mull it over. And then if I want to buy it, then great. I, note that I bought it, and then it's gone and I buy it. Or if I don't, then it gets added to a list of things that I didn't buy. So then I can kind of remember like, okay, I've, said no to the last 5 things that were kind of frivolous that I didn't really need. So like maybe, I can say yes to this like cute floral shirt that I really want. It gives me a little bit more buyer's confidence and knowing, what I have already said no to, and so where I can kind of afford to say yes to some things. I also have reminders on this page of like things I should not be buying anymore. First on that list is sweaters, because I don't know what possesses me, but I buy sweaters all the time and I'm like, oh, it's so cute. And then I'm like, I live in Texas. Why am I buying more sweaters? I certainly don't need I do not need one more sweater. So I'm not buying sweaters. So if you catch me buying a sweater, tell me to stop. And then also plants. I need to stop buying plants because I have way too many and we're going to move in a month and I don't know what to do with all my plants. So also, if you need a plant, hit me up. I might be able to donate one to your cause. Another page that I have on my Notion is my content planner. So for all of my podcasting, my website, my social media, I have a content planner that I use, that I'm currently using for this podcast that I'm recording. And on this content planner, I have goals, I have quick to-do lists, I have future ideas, I have lists of content that I'm, creating and working on. And I can toggle between it being a table and it being a calendar, and so I can kind of see what, my week is looking like. It's very, very helpful. Another page that I have on Notion is a law school template that I'm working on building out, where it'll be kind of my hub for all things law school, with all my classes, my notes, all those kinds of things. So once I get that situated, maybe I will share that with everybody if that's something that people would want to use or look at, or, take ideas from. And then I also have a moving to-do list separate from my other to-do list, like my more generic one, because, oh my gosh, moving is so much and there's just a zillion things I feel like that need to be done. And so to keep myself from feeling super overwhelmed, I've separated out those kind of areas of my life of like current and moving and future and all of that stuff. So everything moving is on this to-do list, and I've got administrative stuff like canceling utilities, setting up new utilities, setting up rent payments, those kinds of admin stuff. And then I have to like change my name on all my postal stuff and all of my insurance. There's just, if you've ever moved, you understand. Also, we have to like book the movers, and there's just so much to do with moving that it's a little bit overwhelming. So separating that and compartmentalizing it a little bit helps me. So those are some of the things that I use the most in Notion. I would really recommend anybody to use it if you have like a tiny amount of tech ability. It's a little bit challenging. You kind of have to create the page. Unless you're using a template, then you can you don't need quite as much of that like computer literacy. The best thing I can say though is to find templates and then learn through the templates. Like, how did they create this? Okay, like what do I need to do to recreate that? That was the fastest way that I could figure out how to learn the system. And it took some hours, I will say. I probably spent about maybe like 2 full days of like really intensive working through the systems and trying to figure out how to make those different tables and things myself. So maybe like 16 hours or so of learning, which sounds like a lot, but really that's just like 2 days. So it's not too terrible. There's also some really great tutorials, like YouTube tutorials that you can look at. Those are really helpful to kind of help walk you through all of your Notion needs. I would say though, if you are in the middle of a like difficult time where you're really stressed out, if you're in law school currently or med school or like something like that, I would not recommend starting now. Find a time like over Christmas break or over a summer, if you've got some time to like really devote and not have that feel like a stressful, wasteful time of your life, then I would just hold off until you have kind of some space to learn and be able to absorb it. I think when you're learning so many other things that are obviously far more important than the ins and outs of a program called Notion, it's definitely not number one priority. But if you haven't already set something up for law school, or if you're looking for a change in your planner life, then I would definitely recommend Notion. And they don't pay me to say any of this. I just really like the program. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I can definitely send you in the right direction as far as the YouTube videos that I've watched and really enjoyed learning about. If you don't have time and you're already in the weeds without a planner and like you need something, go out and buy a paper one and get started today. I'll go buy it for you. You have to have a planner if you're in the weeds. I promise you, it will free your mind. It will free it will just send you in the right direction. And if you're feeling that way, listening to my podcast about to-do lists and why those are so important to our brains, definitely give that a listen while you're on your way to the store to go buy a planner, because it gives you a lot of insight into why we like to cross things off lists. Another great tool that I use other than Notion is my Google Calendar. So that's obviously where I house my email, and I keep all of my calendar, like my schedule and everything that I plan to do. It's not a task list, so I don't have individual tasks on there, but I just do time blocking where I say, this is the time that I am reading for this class, or this is the time that I'm getting lunch every day, or this is, my gym time or my alone time or dinner time. And so I block off my calendar so that I know every minute of the day is accounted for, and then I use that time appropriately. And so the hardest part is obviously following the calendar and following the things that I've said that I'm going to do. But once I have that kind of structure to my day, then I know a little bit more how to execute the day. And at the end of it, I can look back and see how productive I was and see what I got done. And I can make adjustments from there. If I wasn't able to get my reading done all week within that certain time frame, maybe I need to look at adjusting my time to really account for what I need to use the time for. There is a function where you can put tasks into your Google Calendar, and I'll do that for things that I really need to get done and I kind of keep forgetting, like scheduling a certain doctor's appointment or, things like that I really am wanting to get done. I'll go ahead and put it as a task on my Google Calendar, and then it houses it over to the side a little bit, but on the day still. And if you are interested in that, you can certainly look up like YouTube videos where it shows you how to really utilize your Google Calendar. I would recommend using those and kind of using the resources that you have to be as organized as possible, especially in a time where your time is so important, and it is vitally important that you use it wisely and that you use all the time that you have. And so it's definitely good to use those tools. One last thing is that I wanted to give some practical tips for planning to plan for those who maybe don't feel like planning is their forte, or they're feeling a little bit lost in all of this and don't know where to start. So I have 4 sort of easy little steps that you can take to kind of begin this process. So number 1 is just set aside some time each week to plan out your week, whether it's on Sunday or Monday or Friday evening. Whenever it is, take some time, 15, 20, 30 minutes, to really sit down and piecemeal out what you're going to do for the rest of the week. Make a plan, put in those breaks, put in time with your friends, put in that dinner that you've got, a birthday party, all of your reading assignments, when you're going to do each of them. Sometimes what we do is spend a lot of time spinning our wheels instead of actually executing things. So if you can spend some time scheduling out and blocking out that time, it will save you a lot of sort of scrambling during the week. The second thing is to include like a half day, or if you can afford it, a full day of every week being catch-up time. So that when you inevitably are falling behind on readings, or you're feeling a little bit like you're frazzled and you really needed to complete some assignments, you have some built-in buffer where you can do some catching up. The other great benefit of that is that it can be a reward. If you're all caught up, then you get to take a break or you get to do something fun. You can sort of count on that time if you need it, but then you can also use it as a break or a breather if you have already accomplished everything. And it kind of gives you a good positive reinforcement to stay on task and keep up with all of your assignments, because you know that you get this chunk of time that's just for you later in the week if you are all caught up. The third thing is to hold yourself to those time frames and just move on if you're not done. If you get to the end of your, hour and a half block where you say you're going to read for a certain class, if you get to the end of it and your time is up, move on to the next thing. I mean, granted, if you've got a couple more pages, maybe finish those up. So in moderation, but if you are like way behind, then you should just move on to the next thing so that you can at least get a little bit done for each of those classes if you don't have time to get everything done. Which is why earlier I had mentioned if you get through a week and you're like, man, I really didn't have enough time to read for any of my classes, then modify for your next week. Always modify and adjust. And if something isn't working, change it, fix it. The fourth thing is if you feel yourself slipping into this sort of flip-flopping between things and frantic scurrying around trying to get things done, just stop and orient yourself. Get back on track with your plan. Do one thing at a time. It's a wasted energy and it's a waste of time to just be running from one thing to the other. There's a lot of psychology that tells us that your brain operates best when it knows what it's doing. And so if you keep flipping from one thing to the other, then your brain has to reorient itself to the new task every time. So best not to flip back and forth if possible. So in summary, the big ticket item of this podcast is if you don't have a planner, my God, please go get one. And if you have been using a planner and you're ready for something a little bit more advanced or something that's digital that you can take with you everywhere you go, I would personally really recommend Notion. There's all sorts of videos online where you can get advanced information on how to set it up. I have some templates that I may be sharing with you guys at some point because I have really found a lot of value in them. So be on the lookout for that. And then also use your Google Calendar, or if you use Outlook Calendar or any other calendar that you have, but just use something to be able to execute your day and have everything planned out so that you can kind of stay on track and get a game plan together for your entire semester or your entire year, quarter, whatever it is that you are planning. So that's all that I have for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, please check out my Instagram, which is legalteeny_podcast. And then you can check out my website, which is legalteeny.com. I would love to hear from you. And if there's anything that you'd like me to cover, then please let me know. Thanks so much for listening. This has been Legaltini, your very own sip of law school.